Um, yeah, it's definitely, I think, particularly in the nutrition space, we've become very heavy on all you need is a caloric deficit, and it's nice to
Yeah.
start to see more and more of that be, okay, yeah, it's an important part, but if you don't change your habits and your behaviors and your mindset and your attitude, and
Yeah.
it's not going to be for long, right? That you kind of ultimately get the success that you're after. So
Yeah.
I'm really
Absolutely.
excited to deep dive into that. Do you want to give us a little bit of background? We kind of spoke a little bit just previously to hitting record, and you mentioned that last year in particular was the year that you've been waiting for a long time in terms of having time to work on some particular side projects. So yeah, give us the big intro, give us the big bio.
The big intro. So my name is Melissa Linke, and I'm the founder of 365 Lean, which is just over a year old, like your baby.
Yep.
And I'll probably say it's probably been just as demanding, to be honest. First year of business is always a little bit tough. But this business was born out of, I would say, 20 plus years of frustration with where the industry was and where my own health was and where other people's health was. So it was really a trifecta situation. So what most people don't know about me is that I was obese in my younger years, and I went through every possible thing that you could do wrong to try and resolve that issue. And that was diet pills, that was every diet you could think of, that way even extended to consults for liposuction. I was just in a place where I think a lot of people are, where they're super desperate to lose weight and will do anything the media tells them to do. So that's, as you were saying, counting the macros and just focusing on calories in versus calories out and going with what the media tells you to do at that particular time. And it wasn't until I went down the fitness model path and got super ripped and lean that I thought, you know what? I finally made it. I got lean. This is great. Everything's fine. And then lo and behold, another 18 months later, I relapsed and ended up about 20 plus kilos heavier. And I got to tell you, as a fitness competitor, I for sure had some good habits. Like I was comp prepping for a good 2 years. But the reality of that was I was eating off a piece of paper and I was training 5, 6 times a week, strength training, and also doing cardio every day and sprints every day. And it was just unsustainable. So in my mind at that point in time, sorry, this is a long story. You
No,
wanted the
go
long
for it.
one, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So in my mind, that's what I thought was what you needed to get healthy. You needed a nutrition plan. You needed to train 5, 6 times a week. You needed to do cardio every single day. And it was entirely restrictive. Or you'd go and you do the cheat meal thing on the weekend where you stay through the week and then you just smash it hard with your cheat meal on the weekend and pretty much outdo everything that you've done, which I think is the model that most people tend to run on now. And I think is why a lot of people don't see the results they want now. Um, and then moving on from that, I then found habits and I stopped working to timeframes. So all the 12-week challenges that are out there, they suggest that someone changes for only 12 weeks. But if you remove that barrier to time and you start training for a lifetime of longevity and for a lifetime of health, and to work on your inflammatory properties and to work on your health in like a nutrient from a nutrient point of view and a nutritional point of view, it was just way better than focusing on calories in, calories out, exercise, and oh, how lean am I today? Oh, can I see some abs in the mirror today? It was just became so much more than that. And that's the approach that I took with my clients. And started teaching them about habits as well and filtering that through to them. This isn't just a 12-week thing. This is your life you're talking about and your health for life.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of where 365 Lean was born, purely out of frustration that people would sit in my office with me and say, hey, Melissa, I lost 5 kgs doing, X celebrities program. And I'm like, okay, cool, great. But they're sitting in front of me and they're subsequently 10 kilos heavier, but they're still insisting that that process worked for them. And I'm trying to help them see the difference that, maybe it didn't actually work if you're sitting here in front of me now 10
Yeah.
kilos heavier and more unhealthy and not feeling great about yourself in your own skin. So, that was saddening to see. And for years, I'd wanted to come up with a habit building program. And finally, 2020 was a chance that I actually got to make that. But it's definitely a swimming upstream kind of thing against all the other things in the media, all the quick fixes. It's definitely a message that will be a long-term rollout.
Yeah, it's hard to sell, isn't it? When there is so much noise about quick fixes and shortcuts and hacks and
Yeah.
all the rest of it, that this consistency and small incremental changes over long periods of time is unsexy as hell, but like actually what works, right?
Yeah, catchphrase of life. How do I make habits sexy for people?
Yeah. I don't know if you found this, but I've definitely found since James Clear actually wrote Atomic Habits that
Mm.
giving that to people to read has actually made like even habits as a bit more of a buzzword, like in a good way.
Yeah,
And just kind of like bringing that into the public eye and having people start to note really that like, well, a 1% improvement on day one doesn't feel like a lot, but if you add up that 1% that you're doing every day over the next 365 days or 5 years or 10 years,
yeah.
that over that period of time, it does really amount to some pretty purposeful, amount of change, right?
Makes a significant change. People don't realize that you can really start so small, and when you do that, you're just way more successful. I think we tend to overestimate our skill set. So we think that we can change 5 different things at once. We can do the diet at once, we can change our hydration at once, we can change our training at once. But the reality is we can deal with maybe one teeny tiny change at best, right? So if you work with that premise, you're more likely to be successful in the long run.
Yeah, it's funny how I think everybody understands like compound interest in terms of finance, but when we try to apply it to our health, all of a sudden it breaks down, right? That we just don't see the
Yeah.
correlation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's even with COVID, there's a correlation there between restriction and human behavior, right? So we're all restricted. So we're wanting to kind of push against that, and people are starting to protest and it's starting to get violent now. And just goes to show with human nature, people really don't like being restricted. And that also, like compound interest, extends over to dieting and nutrition and also just health for life.
Yeah.
It all just crosses over all these principles in life, I find.
I think the COVID example is another really good one of how much we don't like huge, sweeping, overwhelming change all at once,
No.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. Ultimately, if you are making big, like you said before, these big changes and trying to change everything at once, like ultimately none of it is sustainable, and you do end up in a worse position than when you started, right? So
Yeah, we can handle anything for a short amount of time, but as you would know, you want people to do it long term. It needs to be small, needs to be incremental, and something that kind of integrates into your life rather than overtakes it. People still want to be able to go out and have their brunch. They don't want to be restricted from their brunches and their lunches and their socializing and their drinks after work. So you need to find a way to kind of work with the nature of people and make it palatable and make them want to do it, not to see it as restriction, right? And that's doable. Like, it's so much more doable than people think.
the good old days where you could go out for lunch and brunch and drinks after.
Stop it. Stop it.
So that journey for you then, that being overweight, when you were younger, is that sort of what led you? Was it that comp experience that led you to want to work within the industry? Was it going through that, yourself and wanting to kind of share and save others, the same sort of elongated journey? Was that kind of how you got into personal training?
100%.
Yeah.
So initially, the thought process was, well, if I can go from obese to getting on stage, anyone could do this. And I was quite passionate about comp prepping and whatnot. But as that unfolded and I realized the damage that I'd done to myself, because you don't know what you don't know, do you, Ben? Like, you don't know how damaged you are until you're sitting in front of 5 different naturopaths and you still can't sleep. You have 1 ounce of caffeine and suddenly you're bouncing off the walls or you're falling asleep. Like, you just don't know the damage until it's done, until you've got the knowledge. And then after I went through that process was when I really, no, backtrack. So once I went through that process and then I put on more weight again after that, it wasn't until after that point, and when I did get like 365 lean and I now just maintain health for life, that was the point where I'm like, well, hang on a minute. I don't want people have to experience this. It's really quite soul crushing to go from obese to thinking you've done the right thing and you've gotten it all right and you're like the epitome of health and everyone's looking up to you in the gym and asking you how you did it, to the guy that's then put on 20 kilos after that. That's soul crushing. That hurts a little bit, hurts your spirit, hurts your self-esteem, I've got to tell you.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to have to go through such big fluctuations in their life to get a result. Like, it's not necessary. Learn from my mistakes.
Your origin story is very similar to ours, which
Oh,
yeah, it's quite nice, I think, given usually what kind of practitioners that we do have in this industry, to find other good guys and good girls and people that seem to be
yeah,
flying the flag to kind of be helpful rather than, yeah, so much of the industry is really capitalizing and trying to take advantage of insecurity and ignorance and fear and really, trying to make money off it.
yeah.
But I'm interested to hear now, and I'll go on record even as saying too, and no doubt you
Yeah.
experienced this, like when you I remember even being at my leanest and thinking to myself, even at that point, like, oh, I thought I'd be leaner, or I thought like I'd feel differently, or I thought there'd be this like big ticker tape parade, there'd be confetti, like I
Yeah.
finally did it, and there's just none of that.
You
There's
didn't
just
get the
like,
parade?
nah, I didn't. Did
Oh
you?
man, I got the parade.
Oh, there
Yes.
you go. I guess maybe it was worth it for you then.
No, because I was at the parade, but I was still standing there looking at my legs that my coach used to pick on and say, "We need to get them down. We need to get them down," thinking I was still obese. It was the weirdest thing. In fact,
Yeah.
to this day, like I still sometimes like I think body image is one of those things that you probably don't necessarily cure or solve. It's just something that you manage for the rest of your life once you've been down that path.
Yeah.
So even to this day, I still have to manage thoughts and be conscious of my thoughts around what I see in the mirror. And sometimes I don't feel like who I am, and it doesn't reflect what I look like on the outside. It's really interesting, actually.
It's kind of a trauma, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of scarring. Yeah, and it seems strange to say, but I know even for us working as nutritionists, it took the better part of we've been doing it now for 6 years, and it really took the better part of 3.5, 4 years to be comfortable with not having to be at my leanest all year round to feel like what I had to say was valid or was worth sort of saying.
Yeah.
Um, and it's funny how you kind of go through all those sorts of stages, and when you start to remove a lot of those layers as to like, well, who am I if I'm not kind of like my body fat percentage or how defined I am. It's actually, that's the rewarding journey, right? And I think
Yeah, it
maybe the
is.
only thing to come out of it, the positive, is that you realize that getting to a certain number or a certain percentage is, it doesn't actually solve any of your issues. It doesn't actually help.
No, it doesn't solve a single thing, and it doesn't give you more credibility than anyone else to talk about your journey or to coach people either. So I think, what you're referring to is like imposter syndrome. My
Yeah.
God, if I'm not at my leanest, how can I tell other people to go out and do that for themselves? But the reality is, you and I both know that being that lean all year round for the majority of people isn't actually that healthy. Or if they can do it healthily, I guess it's not that sustainable for most people because it doesn't allow for really much of a social life. And you really do have to flog your body pretty hard to stay in such lean condition for the entire year. But for sure, staying in healthy body fat levels is 100% achievable for everyone, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
interested now to get your take and your feelings on physique competition or bodybuilding competition as it stands now. Is that still something that you would work with clients to prepare them for? Is that something you feel like you tend to steer people away from? Like, what are your kind of thoughts on
Yeah,
the
that
industry?
is a great, great question. My thoughts around that extend towards, well, it starts with a very blunt conversation about why someone wants to do it. So if someone wants to get on stage because they're looking to get some external validation to prove their worth, or if I know, because based on the questions I ask them, that they've got a disordered disordered relationship with food and their bodies, I will not put that person on stage. I will not be responsible for worsening someone's condition. But if I have a chat with that person and in the interim stages, they've got a great relationship with their body, they're just doing it as a challenge, they're well aware that that's not an all year round kind of leanness, and they're in a good state of mind, I will definitely take that person on board. But I will certainly not be the person that creates like a 5-10 year long recovery from that competition process for an athlete that just isn't in the headspace to do it.
Yeah. It's been an interesting progression because, I mean, look, 10, 15 years ago, like, there was no CrossFit, there was no F45. It was basically, you did chest on Mondays, back on Tuesdays. Like, everyone was training with this, like, bodybuilding kind of split and style, and that level of leanness was essentially, especially as men, like, how we kind of, that's what we viewed as being fit, right? As being healthy. Um, and so I think it's nice to see that there are so many alternatives now, whether it be doors opening up through Olympic weightlifting or powerlifting or, like I said, CrossFit, where the performance is actually on. It's how much you can lift, or how much, which you can't fake, right? It's not just like how you look ultimately.
Exactly. In fact, I would prefer to see if these people would be open to doing a powerlifting competition. I think that would be more rewarding, truthfully.
Yeah. Do you find similarly with bodybuilding, although it be more on physique, that you get a number of clients with issues with like weight class based sports?
Repeat the question.
So with bodybuilding, and it's more about like a relative level of leanness and a body fat percentage. But do you ever find with, say, powerlifting, with any of your clients that do that, that there's still whether it be elements of fear or unsureness, like in terms of having to weigh a certain number, like be in a specific weight class? Is that something you guys see a lot too?
Yeah. So I haven't trained any powerlifters to get on the platform from a performance point of view, but I have definitely trained them from a nutrition standpoint. And yes, that's been make or break for people. And those same themes around body image and relationships with food have influenced that for sure.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating how caught up on certain numbers we get, and then at the end of the day, they're just numbers, right?
They are just numbers. And here's the thing, people don't realize, like, it's not like you hit a number and then suddenly that's it, you've gained it, you've achieved it for the rest of your life. It's a whole maintenance and change of habits and routine thing if you want to maintain what you've got. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of 12-week challenges and physique competitions all tend to fail.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So where do you start? It's day one. You've got a new client. They've got some pretty big and lofty goals.
Mm.
Do you like if there's people listening that are looking to make big changes? Do you find the
Mm.
best way is just to start, just to get some momentum? Start with the low hanging fruit, like build your confidence. Is
Yeah.
that yeah,
Oh man, that low hanging fruit is gold.
yeah,
So if I've got someone in sitting in front of me right now, I'm saying, hey, what are your habits like now? So what do you eat on a daily basis? How do you move each week? What do you drink? All those questions we're going through. And then I've got a habit kickstart kit that I'll give to them and that people can also get free from my website. And from there, they can literally pick any goal they could possibly want. And it teaches them how to work backwards and reverse engineer from that goal to get teeny tiny low hanging fruit that they can kind of just journal away every single day. So, yep, drank my 1 extra litre of water, tick it off my page. Yep, did that for a week, move on to the next one, add the next onion layer. That's pretty much where they start.
and you find the actual tracking element of that to be useful. Like there's something about crossing things off or ticking boxes or and that sort of stuff that you find helps. Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote an article recently for Fitness First magazine about progress tracking, and it is absolutely essential because your memory is not a reliable tool. And as humans, you would know this. If you're not progressing and you're stalled, like where we are with COVID right now, everyone feels hopeless and everyone feels sad and miserable because there's no hope, there's no progress. We're stagnant, if not moving backwards. So when you can physically see it on a piece of paper that you've done something for a day, it gives you a sense of reward and gives you a sense of hope that it's all going to work out and things will move forward. Humans just love progression. And if you can give yourself like a teeny tiny dose of that every day, you will keep going generally.
Yeah. Are you still working as a personal trainer at Fitness First?
Well, technically, if they ever open,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. How's that been over the last 18 months?
I guess those that innovate succeed.
Yeah,
So it's been rough, but ultimately there's been park training and online training. And in my other time, developing 365 Lean has kept me working like 50, 60 hours a week. So
yeah.
to be honest, this project would not have come to life if Fitness First had been open for the last 2 years. So
Do you
I'm
think,
grateful in a way. Yeah.
do you think you'll go back when gyms were? Do you think you'll go back into the space?
That's a great question. To be honest, I can't see myself paying the rent for the space.
Yeah,
I just don't think it's feasible given the amount of clientele in the city is quite low. But I'm also planning to go to uni, I think 90% sure. So I think that'll be taking up a lot of my time. So I'll probably do training on the side of uni. Yeah.
yeah. Which fitness first were you PTing at?
QE, do you know it?
Yeah, I used to train at Fitness First in QV.
Stop it.
Yeah, yeah. I used to work for Accenture, which used to be in the Westpac
Oh,
building. So
oh,
yeah. How long have you
oh,
been there for?
yeah, I've been there for about 5 years now, I think.
I think that might have been pretty much when we finished up. Do you know Adam McCubbin?
I was about to say, you're the Adam McCubbin days, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we actually had him on the podcast a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
But yeah, there you go. There you go. It's a small world.
well, yeah.
That'll that landscape and that style of personal trainers paying rent to work, like it'll be interesting to see how that evolves and what that looks like. Because you're right, ultimately, PTing in the city, if people are only working 1 or 2 days a week, like sparingly at the most, like we've kind of seen over the last like 12 months,
Yeah.
what are you doing? So,
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, I don't think that model is going to work exceptionally well. And it has seen a drop of, I think about, don't quote me on this percentage, but I think about 50%, 60% have dropped off anyway.
yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be a build-up phase for both Fitness First and for all the trainers. But
Yeah.
hopefully they'll do the right thing and look after their trainers. Otherwise, there's about a gazillion other gyms that I could probably go to if need be. Let's face it.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, that you mentioned before you were to blame for the lockdown and finally having time, but I think it's right. I think that again with your habits, like that mindset of sticking to it and kind of getting things done, and when big things like COVID do occur, if you've got a plan and something that you're working towards, or a hobby or a business, and you can see the progression in that, like that's obviously what keeps you coming back and spending time on it, right?
It's that and purpose, progression and purpose, the two great P's of life.
Yeah, I like that. I might have to use
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
the great P's, progression and purpose. And we could also argue peanut butter, but we won't.
yeah, yeah. Take us through. Do you want to take us through, I guess, kind of what your program looks like, the specifics? Obviously, you focus on habits, but more specifically, what that kind of looks like, how you support your clients and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I launched phase 1 last year and I was really excited. So it was a whole lifestyle product, but what I've realized now is that maybe people want something a little bit more specific to fat loss. So I'm currently in the process of building version 2, as you do, innovate. That's
Yeah.
what the world's about now. And that is going to be about habits for sustainable fat loss. But as far as the program goes, everyone goes through a particular module where they'll learn about whatever it might be. For example, macronutrients, you learn protein, carbohydrates, fat, about mindful eating, about sleep tinctures, about alcohol behavioral styles. And once you go through that module, when you get to the bottom, there are specific steps to follow for a goal. It is super simple, super easy, the habit's there, and then all you need to do is track it off for the week. And then when you get to the end of the week in the course, there's actually a tiny quiz, like 5 questions long, that takes you through a series of questions to kind of see whether or not you've got a grasp on your habit.
Mhm.
And if you do, you progress on to the next module, easy, continue on with that goal and keep layering it on. And then in that process, people track their goals on a habit tracker, which they can do online, and then they can see how far they've come. So the beauty of that is that there is no time frame, so people can really work at it for as long or as little as they like. So you've got like the type A overachievers in the room. They might get it done in, say, 15 weeks and like, yeah, I nailed XYZ goal every single week. Now I've got them all stacked up and I'm doing great. Or you've got people that, have new children or are studying something else or are just tacking onto it and just kind of going through it at their own pace. And I can tell you a year later, people are still on it and still working with it, which
Yeah.
makes me exceptionally happy to know that their habits are still sticking.
Perfect. So
Yeah.
it's like a self-paced learning kind of, is that right?
Yeah. You can,
Yeah.
you can call it an e-course, basically. It's a course. Yeah.
Perfect. And then you can go through it multiple times if you need to too, huh?
Yeah. And I strongly encourage that because even you and I could probably agree that even as people who are leaders in this field, occasionally one habit just drops off the end. So it gets a little bit rusty. So you just put a little bit more focus, put a spotlight on it, and then you just bring it back. And it's just kind of like keeping all the balls in the air when you're juggling. Sometimes one you just got to throw a little higher every now and again, you know?
Yeah. It's always water.
Yeah, it's
For me,
always
it's
water.
always water. It's always like I'll leave my drink bottle in the car and then realize a week later like I still haven't gone and got it and my water has been super low for like an extended
Yeah.
period.
And suddenly you're a prune, yes.
Yeah, especially in summer. Hopefully the warmer weather is a good reminder. Do you find seasonally like that there is more of an uptake when the weather starts to turn, people come out of hibernation, it tends to be a little more of a motivator to get started?
I don't remember. I know that in the industry, yes, but it feels like it's been so long since I've been surrounded. How do I put it? It's just been so out of kilter for almost 2 years now. It's hard to see. But traditionally, when I was working as a trainer in a gym, it actually got really quiet over summer. And I find most people don't tend to come back to their habits and good health until about February every year. So I think it's November and February, kind of the make or breaks, where people either decide, oh, no, it's Christmas, I can't be bothered, or it's Christmas, it's summer's here, I have to be bothered. They either go one of two
Yeah.
ways, I find. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like it's kind of the whole purpose of the program is not to feel like you have to choose between Christmas and New Year's and like progressing
Yeah.
forward on your health, but that's still like such a mindset that so many people tend to have is that it's one or the other, that it can't be both at the same time. Yeah.
I teach that as a foundation lesson, basically. So I guess what I didn't say is I have a whole system called Mind Coach. So you and I, once again, we know that nutrition and exercise is not the be all and end all. There is a whole mindset shift that I would argue has to happen kind of, if not simultaneously, but before you kind of go down that path. And a lot of that is teaching people about all or nothing. So it's not falling off the bandwagon. It's just about rebalancing. So sure, you drop an apple off the back of your cart, fine, keep going, get another apple along the way. And you just keep going and you learn how to navigate through life while still maintaining your health. So you know when to kind of push it, you know when to pull back, you know what to do and how to integrate everything in.
Yeah. You mentioned you were contemplating going back to studying. What are you going back to study?
Clinical dietitian. I would like to be a clinical dietitian. Yeah.
Lovely. Nice.
Yeah. So I figure you can't be a PT forever. And I think that really extends to the work I'm doing with 365 Lean. And if I could get that into the government as an initiative and get that rolled out to Australia, I would be the happiest person in the world because it really, really hurts my soul that 67% of Australia is overweight or obese. And I just don't feel like they need to be. I don't
Yeah.
feel like it has to be that hard for everyone.
The government's a hard one. Like I feel, yeah, it's super hard to turn an enormous ship, right?
Of
Um,
course. Yeah.
yeah, and it's I guess the flip side to having like the bodybuilding style and look like information's never been more accessible than it is right now, but I think in many ways
Yeah.
it's actually made things harder too, right? Because there's just so much information now that it is super overwhelming.
Mm.
Um, and I think for the most still for the majority of people, I think that they still are 10 or 15 years behind where they feel like
Mm.
they don't want to be a bodybuilder or they don't, they're scared to lift weights or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
it's like, it doesn't have to be one extreme or the other, guys. Like there
Yeah.
can be this middle ground where you just do more than you're doing now or change these one or two things and still be able to get to where you want to be. Right.
I completely agree, and I talk about that often. The whole issue is there is so much accessible information, but also there's a gap because we lack the application skills. So that's what I think habits really kind of bridge. So if you can get the right knowledge, because there is a lot of bullshit out there we can agree on too.
Yeah.
If you can get the right knowledge and then you can find a way to apply it by way of a habit, then you really have got the winning formula. But where people have the gap is, sure, I've got all this knowledge, but how the hell do I apply it? And then in addition to that, that knowledge that they've got that might be correct might not be sexy to them at that time because it's still, 15 years into the future.
Yeah.
So I think habits might be a booming thing in 15 years. We'll see.
We'll be 15 years ahead of the game then.
We will be. Well, that's what I'm hoping. Start now. So the government has done what? Their traffic lights, their pyramid, their swap it, don't stop it. Can we make habits the next one? Like that's my goal. Can we do that?
It's funny. I don't know if you ever remember any of like the nutritional like information you got at school, but like the old pyramid, and it was just basically like breads and
Yeah.
cereals as like the majority of your intake. I'm like, man, we've come so far, but
We have
still.
come so far.
But if that's the last kind of I guess exposure to nutritional material that you've had, like because it's you're right, like it is ever changing. So it's not only accumulating the information, it's then like trying to stay up to date with new information as it comes to. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. Even
Yeah.
for like I don't know if you find it, even for us, like trying to stay kind of up to date with a lot of different research that's going on, like that's almost a full-time job in itself, right? Um,
It is.
and
And
then
also,
it takes time to trickle down into your practice, right?
yeah,
Before it's like, oh, updating it again, right?
that is 100% correct. There is a lot out there. Um, and often it's the person with the loudest voice in the room or the most followers that really gets the message out, which is not always the right message, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate.
I think it was Lane Norton created this post who I'm a big fan of. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, he did this post basically and was like, if Facebook has the ability to like warn you and stop like misinformation when it comes to vaccines and COVID, like why can't it do this when it comes to dietary information? Like why can't we have this when it comes up with
100%.
detoxes? And yeah, I was like, that's a good point. It's a good point. It would be interesting to have a social media where that blue tick wasn't just for how many followers you have, but actually like your level of education or experience within a particular field that you're like choosing to comment on, you know?
Yeah. Fun fact, you can actually buy that tick anyway, so you really don't have to
Ah,
be
there you
anyone.
go.
Buy some followers, buy a tick, 20 grand later, you've got yourself influencer status.
Now, speaking of influencer, great segue. You're obviously someone who's like super prolific on Instagram and you're putting out plenty of video content and reels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, how are you doing it? Because I find with like the social media stuff, I feel like it's such a huge time investment for something
Yeah.
that is kind of like in the spotlight for a minute and then 2 days later it's like you're going back to the well and back to the well and back to the well.
Yeah, it is a huge amount of investment for very, very little return. Like I sometimes will pour my heart and my soul into a post and trying to educate and trying to make sure I've got the right words to get the right message to cut through the noise of all the bullshit to get like, I don't know, next to nothing engagement. And I'm not gonna lie, it hurts my feels a little bit. But thinking from a higher place here is there have also been times where that post has had no engagement, but it's resonated with one person and it's helped them make an impact in their life.
Yeah.
So from the motivation perspective, I keep myself going because I know it's the silent scrollers and the one percenters that maybe need to hear it. And from my business perspective, I know that my message that I've got is a little bit ahead of the time and a little bit left of the curve. So I understand that I'm going to need to put in the hard yards now and keep repeating my message in order for people to start to hear it and want to accept it later on. That's where I sit with social media, but it is really hard to manage getting all the content out and being relevant all the time. I can understand from that perspective, it's quite a big undertaking. In fact, someone's told me I do the marketing work of about a 3-person agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a chat with a friend of mine who's a PT, and he's throwing his hand at the TikTok game at the moment.
Yeah.
And he's just like, the conversation is, he's like, I spend more time like trying to do content than I'm actually doing coaching clients at the moment. Like,
Yeah.
but he's like, it's like that necessary evil, right?
Yeah.
But my biggest fear with Instagram is like, are we still going to be using Instagram in 3 or 4 years? Like, and how do you take an audience and convert it to a completely different platform like down the road? You know?
Yeah, that is the thing with an audience. Like, it's not great to rely on having a third party application like Instagram or Facebook for your audience and for your database, because there have been times when people's accounts have been blocked, so they've lost their entire audience.
Yeah.
They've lost everything, and have nothing to show for it. So it's still, as much as it's a bit like snail mail, it's still better off to have an email database where you've got a direct connection with people who want to know about your service and want to know about your topic of interest. It's actually much better to get that really target niche kind of following.
Yeah. And you've got, I assume you would do like a Facebook group for people that are doing your modules and your program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
How
think
do
for the
you
next
how do you
sorry.
find how do you find running that? Do you find that it's again like a challenge to get people to engage with each other? Is it more of like this the silent stalker type, like it is in ours a little bit? Yeah.
Silence is for sure. It's definitely a learning curve. I thought I could just start a group and then everyone would chat amongst themselves. I was wrong. So, having to post in that was a learning curve for me. I didn't realize I had to start the conversation. Now I do.
Yeah.
Um, to be honest, most clients that I have reach out to me on an individual basis, but I think, I would encourage people to reach out in a group more, because if you're thinking it, someone else is, and clearly a lot of people need the same answer. So, community is good.
Yeah. Yeah, community's tough. I think even finding too when we first started and our main clients were like friends of ours who like also knew each other, it was much easier because they did feel quite comfortable asking questions
Yeah.
in front of each other and having those discussions. But
Mm.
it's hard as it grows and there's a lot of people who are brand new to macros or brand new to nutrition and training that to ask a question in a group of 300 other people, they probably feel know all the answers, right?
Yeah.
It's quite a difficult culture to try to cultivate. um,
Just a thought bubble here. What about a buddy system? So if I had 300 followers in my group, which I don't yet, I hope to, I would perhaps implement a buddy system where some of the senior guys could maybe take the hand of the newer guys for like 4 weeks or something and just, check in with them. And that also makes your, longer standing members feel important and lifts them up a level and bolsters their confidence, and the young guys get help as well.
yeah, our coaching is all one-on-one, so
Yeah.
um, I feel like there's the communication between coach and client is always quite good.
Mm.
um, but yeah, it's definitely getting better, but it's especially maybe being online too. Like this
Mm.
year in particular, having no in-person competitions or meetups and that sort of stuff too has made
Yeah.
it quite hard to encourage people to come and meet other people.
Yeah.
But in the past, it's been a little bit like, oh, your band or your cat or whatever, and yeah.
Mhm.
So hopefully, it's not too far away from opening back up and yeah, and getting back to the way, not necessarily the way things used to be, but just a little bit more familiarity and yeah, something to work towards.
Yeah. I don't know. Guessing from my perspective, if these last 2 years didn't happen, I would not be making such an impact now and going forward into the future. So I'm grateful for them. As much as I've lost 80% of my business in the first lockdown that we had, and that kind of has gone up and down since. It's still been extremely rewarding to come up with a whole habit-based system that I didn't even know how to do at the start.
Yeah.
It's been a rewarding couple of years, but I'm looking forward to the world being open.
Have you found a like a retention rate from your old clients taking up like the program in its new form now? Has that been something that people are coming back on board to get back into training or working with you or?
No, a lot of my old clients were very gym based in their thinking. So they've really just kind of stuck out of the gym and stayed out of the gym and working from home, which is really unfortunate because I miss them and I love them a lot. But a lot of my new clients are getting more on board with habits and habit building for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been more of a new conversation with newer clients. Yeah.
I guess, yeah, wherever there is, that kind of obstacle, is there's the opportunity too. So it sounds like you've definitely made the most of the last 2 years.
Yeah, look, I'm really trying, and I'm pretty sure people are sick of hearing the word habit out of my mouth, but I'm not going to stop. And one of these days, you guys will thank me. Or you're just going to press like unfollow. One of those two will happen.
Do you have any favorite resources? Is there anything in particular that you've read over the last 12 months or 18 months that you feel has been most beneficial? Is there anything that you'd recommend?
Oh, man. That is a great question. Not read, and hear me out here. I did a Tony Robbins seminar.
How's that?
Now, the face you just made was the face that I made when my client, she's a Tony Robbins coach, she was like, hey, free tickets to Unleash the Power. Like, just give it a go, see what you think.
Yeah.
And I gave her that face of, sure, Tony Robbins, bullshit, whatever. He's just has had too much caffeine and is talking out of his ass. That's really what I thought about the guy. However, he actually made some good points and he did get me around the corner. And if it wasn't for doing those courses, I probably still would be holding on to some of the beliefs that were limiting me in progressing forward.
Yeah.
If I'm being real, it was Mr. Robbins that helped get me off the starting block.
Yeah, I quite like Tony Robbins, and I've read a lot of his stuff. I watched I'm Not Your Guru. Have you seen that on Netflix?
No, I have not.
It's basically like I guess it's like a documentary kind of behind the scenes of like one of his workshops. I can't remember which one in particular, but just like the thought of like being that person that he just like pulls up in like the middle of like 4,000 people, and just goes up. It's like I think there's this one scene where he's talking to this woman in front of everyone about her relationship, and he's like asking her questions, and the more he digs, the more it's like, oh, you're not really into him. So he like makes her take out her phone and like break up with her boyfriend like in front of just like a couple of thousand people. I was like, oh, that is so that'd be tough. I don't, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, he makes a good point though. Of all the business, I've done a couple of business kind of seminars and whatnot, and always the take-home message, and that is the same thing with habits and everything I do, is just take action.
Yeah.
Like you just have to do something, take a step forward imperfectly. You just have to do something.
Yeah.
And that has been, out of all the learning I've done in the last like 2 years, what's really stuck with me. Just take action, just do something. It doesn't have to be perfect, just do it, because the reality is majority of the population talk about things for years and years and years and years and never actually do anything.
Yeah.
And if you just did 5% of the things that were on your list of to-dos that were really meaningful to you, you could potentially have quite a significantly different life, or significantly different health, or a significantly different mindset. It can create significance.
It's so true. I think especially with like social media, like it's almost like, oh, this post, or like you said before, this reel or whatever, it's not going to be perfect, therefore I won't even start. And it's like, you got to do 100 of them and get to a point where you feel like you know what you're doing. But to feel like you know what you're doing, you have to get through like that first 100. Yeah.
And also using Instagram as your yardstick is a poor yardstick, because their algorithm changes so much. You can do something that gets like 2,000 followers one day, or 2,000 views, and the next day it's getting 200. Like it's not a great tool for likes, and views are an awful tool for measuring success.
100%. 100%. It's one of those, like, it almost feels like you're playing into this necessary evil, right? Where it's like we said, it's hard to determine the value that actually drives towards the business, but we know, even from experience, someone might hear or see the brand somewhere else, and then they go to like the Instagram or the Facebook or whatever to
Yeah.
kind of see what it's about. But it's not, so it's like you have to have it, but it's not actually going to be super responsible for driving any more kind of traffic.
No, unless you've got a huge following, Instagram is really not profitable. It's a bit of a liability, to be honest. But
Yeah.
it is for those people who they're on your email subscriber list and they want to check your credibility and they want to see what you're posting, or people that go to your website. It builds credibility. It's kind of like the white pages for them. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, you actually do exist, and vice versa. If you're on Instagram, you don't have a website, people don't think you exist. So you kind of need to have both of those things to have credibility in your viewers' eyes, I think.
Yeah. The other Tony Robbins one I like is he's like, I never negotiate with myself. He's got a plunge pool at like every one of his programs.
Yeah,
But that for me, that changing your physiology can change your psychology was like, that was a massive penny drop moment. Yeah. So if you're
mind
struggling with
blowing.
writer's block, go and sweat and then come back. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wrote, so I write blogs and I kind of post them on my website or I send them out to my clients and whatnot. And one of the themes of my blogs recently was using the moment that counts.
Yeah.
So we are very quick to be easy on ourselves and forgive ourselves. And I love a bit of self-compassion when it's true self-compassion, when it's not self-sabotage.
Yeah.
So, using someone having, what can we use as an example? Something someone might do that's not so great. I don't know. People
Just
go.
binging.
So, for
Binging
example,
on
going
shit.
on
Binging on
binging,
shit.
that's one of my favorite subjects. All right, so you've got an opportunity there. You can continue to binge on the shit, and then you can forgive yourself later and say, oh, you know what? I'll do better tomorrow. And sure, that works to a point, and you should have compassion when you binge because people do struggle with that simply from a real place. But also there's an opportunity before that happens, and that's the moment that counts, where you have a moment, one teeny tiny moment in time where you can make a significant change in action that will change your course, rather than having to wake up and feel shameful and feel sorry and say you'll do it again. Because the reality is most people forgive themselves maybe a little bit too easily under the guise of self-compassion,
Yeah.
and do self-sabotage as a result. So using the moment that counts is incredibly important, I think, for people to make change in their life. Business, relationship, health-wise, relationships. You're about to cheat or you don't. That's the moment that counts.
Yeah.
Like there are so many moments, and you can't just keep forgiving yourself through life and making poor choices. At some point, you got to just change and do something.
I feel like half the population needs a hug and the other half needs a kick up the ass. And the hardest part is determining like which side of the fence a particular person sits on.
Yeah.
Some
That's
need both.
true.
Some of them need both.
Sometimes they need both, truthfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a loving kick, wrapped with love.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I don't want to take up too much of it, but if you want to give, do you want to give your website and your program and all your other socials a bit of a plug?
Yes, I'd love to. So you can go to my website, www.365leanhabits.com, or you can go to Melissa Linke _ on Instagram, and they're basically the two that I run by. And if you jump onto my website, you'll also get a free habit kickstart kit, which has got a habit tracker included as a bonus. So you can literally get started on your habit in the moment that counts, which I would say is around about now.
Right now. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll drop a link in the description to both of those as well.
Amazing.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, and good luck with the bub.
Yeah, thank you very much. We need as much luck as we can get.
You'll be fine. You got it.